You guys have your chat open on the side?
I think we're good to go. He cut out on us, but I guess we'll call the meeting of Falls Township Planning Commission for September or August to order. John, I'll save you the trouble and just let the minutes note that everyone's in attendance. And with that, we're ready for our first application, KA at Fairless Hills LP, 500 Lincoln Highway, tax parcel 13-017-019, zone SC. And because the second application is related, we will kind of probably intermingle and discuss both applications at the same time before we make two separate motions. So with that, I'll leave it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Julie Von Spreckelson from the law firm of Eastburn & Gray here tonight on behalf of the applicant, KA at Fairless Hills LP. First, I want to thank the Planning Commission for allowing us to present our project virtually this evening. We really appreciate the opportunity to move this project forward. I also want to start out by giving a little bit of background on this application and the genesis of this project, because this is the first time that the Planning Commission is reviewing this project. So I'm going to start out by showing you an aerial exhibit of the existing conditions at the property, just to orient you with regard to the property, which is located at 500 Lincoln Highway at the intersection of Arlene's Avenue. If you could go to the aerial, there we are. So you can see that the property is outlined in the white bold.
Sorry, 1 second, there you go.
Color, and the property itself comprises a little over 15.3 acres, and it's located in the SB, the shopping center district, zoning district. The two existing buildings on the property have been there for decades. The long building that's basically an upside down L shape, I would call it, is the shopping center, and it comprises over 188,000 square feet of space in that shopping center. And then there's a standalone restaurant that Justin from Dynamic is pointing out to you that he is the project engineer. So it's a standalone restaurant, and that's about 6,000 square feet. So the background of this project is that when the applicant purchased the property back in 2014, the Planning Commission may recall that the anchor tenant was the Pathmark. And since that time, since the applicant purchased the property, Pathmark went into bankruptcy. So they became bankrupt. And then in addition, unfortunately for applicant, two of its other tenants also vacated their tenancies, and that's the Family Dollar and the Tuesday Morning. So although applicant made some substantial physical improvements to the property and some upgrades, and despite the fact that they hired a national broker, real estate broker, in order to attract and secure additional tenants for the vacancies, they've been having a lot of difficulty doing so. And to the extent that 60,000 square feet of this center remains vacant. It took them 3 years to secure a tenant for the Pathmark empty space. And that tenant was not even a retail tenant. It is Funzilla, so it's an amusement use. And that's pretty telling, and I know that the Planning Commission is familiar with this as well, that the real estate industry, the retail industry has undergone a lot of change. With the increase in online sales, the brick and mortar stores, the shopping centers, they've all had to repurpose themselves. So they're including uses that aren't typically retail. They're including amusement uses, they're including movie theaters, might be considered amusement, restaurants, gyms, that type of thing in their centers in order to remain solvent. And so that's really the genesis of this project. In order to remain solvent at this location and keep this center financially viable, the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing restaurant and then construct a Wawa convenience store. And I'm going to ask Justin to turn to page 8 of the PowerPoint, just so you can see the end result, so you understand what we're trying to accomplish here. So what we're trying to accomplish is what you can see in this overall zoning plan rendering. And you can see that a portion of the property, it's a 2-acre portion, is going to be subdivided, if we can get the approvals, and that portion of the property would also then be rezoned to HC, Highway Commercial District. And from there, we would also need other approvals as well that we acknowledge. We're going to need zoning approval, we're going to need conditional use approval, and we're going to need land development approval. So there's numerous procedural steps, and even to make this project work, but the applicant is committed to this project and making it work so that it can keep its center viable, which is really what their best result could be. So what we did was we met with the township staff back in January of this year, right before the pandemic. And we had a conversation with township staff, and they were very helpful, and we explained where we wanted to end up. And so we were trying to find out the best procedural steps, because there are so many procedural steps, so that we wanted to make sure we were doing it in order, doing it properly, and seeking the approvals that we need in order to move the project forward. So we did meet with them, very helpful, and what we determined was that we would file the applications that are before you this evening, which is the subdivision application. It's a minor subdivision for 2 acres, and then in addition, a rezoning petition to rezone that 2-acre portion to HC Highway Commercial from SC. And so I'm going to ask Justin to go back to the subdivision plan so we can start there. And there's really not too much to discuss with the subdivision plan. Again, it's the 15.3-acre parcel that we're going to subdivide a 2-acre portion, which, as you can see, would be abutting both Lincoln Highway and Arlene's Avenue. So that's the location of the 2 acres that we would like to subdivide. And again, in reviewing this project, we received a number of review letters for the subdivision. One was from Remington and Burnick, the township traffic engineer. They had no comments because this is a minor subdivision of 2 acres. We're not at the land development phase yet. We're not at the zoning phase yet. This is the very beginning. It's only in relation to this 2-acre subdivision. Remington and Burnick said at this time, no comments, no issues. We also received the township landscape architect letter as well. They had a few comments, and we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to address their comments as we move forward in this process. Again, it's more towards an end result. Once we're able to move forward, hopefully, with obtaining the approvals that we need to get to zoning and then get to land development at the very end. Part of the procedural complexity is because we need to create this parcel first in order to have it rezoned. It's not good planning, admittedly, to split zone one single parcel. So we're not rezoning the entire parcel from SC to HC, only a portion of it. And it's just not good planning, as Justin will tell you, and so the township engineer. So what we're going to have to proceed forward with first would be the rezoning. And that's why we're showing you, the subdivision, and that's why we're showing you that first. So really, it's a limited issue. And again, it's difficult to review, as Joe would probably tell you, because in his review letter, if you've seen it, he has about 5 different sections in his review letter. And the first talks about the SC zoning district. And if we're successful in the rezoning, the SC zoning district is not going to apply to this subdivision. The HC district is. So that's why it's a little bit confusing, but we're tracking these applications simultaneously, hopefully to get this accomplished at the same time, so that when we eventually get to zoning, then the only issues will be with regard to the HC district. And so we absolutely acknowledge Joe's letter, and he is extremely helpful with his comments because they're a roadmap for us. They're a roadmap of how we need to proceed forward, and the zoning relief that we're going to need eventually if we're successful in the subdivision and rezoning petition. So we will need the HC zoning variances that are listed in his letter. We acknowledge that. And then we'd move forward with the other zoning comments and the land development. And so we would be comfortable, applicant would be comfortable if the Planning Commission made a favorable recommendation to approve the subdivision, that it would be conditioned on us resolving all of the comments one way or the other in Joe's review letter. So that's the beginning of our presentation with regard to the subdivision. I can get right into the rezoning unless there's any questions with regard to the subdivision itself.
I have some questions regarding the subdivision. Because you've told us what you're going to do with this lot and we know what relief's going to be asked for in the future. I want to know why you can't just make the lot big enough so you don't need variances for the setbacks.
I'm going to have Justin
Sure.
answer that.
And I'm going to flip to the full build out, if you will, just to kind of explain a little better. For one, some of the variances pertain to impervious surface. And as you are aware, the lot as it stands today is already an existing nonconforming. It's already over the existing impervious. By subdividing out a portion of the lot, we're not going to get away from that existing nonconformity because we still need to meet all the parking requirements. We are providing additional green space. The lot that we're subdividing off is essentially going down in impervious, and overall, if you look at the site overall, 4 of the variances pertain to building coverage and impervious surface. We're reducing, if you look at both lots, we're reducing the amount of building coverage and impervious on both lots. So it's the variances that we're requesting are because we're creating a subdivision, but they're impossible to do away with based on the existing nonconformities on site today. A number of the variances also pertain to parking within the yards of the subdivided lot. And based on the configuration of the lot and where PennDOT requires our driveways, we can't create the yards that are required to have no parking within the yards. So a lot of the variances are not necessarily self-inflicted, but they're impossible to do away with as we're trying to redevelop the existing parcel. So I do understand your question, and I think
But you didn't answer it. My question was, why can't you make the site wide enough so that you don't need the building setback variance?
The building setback variance, that the one you're concerned about, the one off of Arlene's?
Yes.
So if we do that, then we would just essentially be triggering more of a parking issue because we have to kill more parking on the site. But that's you're concerned with right here, correct?
Correct.
So that's 89.
I think it's poor planning to create a lot where we know variances are going to be required. And if Wawa were to pull out of here, the building setback you have there is relatively small. Somebody else would come in here, we'd need to grant them 100 variances to do what they want to do. So I think we should comply with the zoning ordinances wherever it was possible. And I think it's easy to move the lot line 10 feet. I think that the parking lot is overkill for the shopping center and the Wawa. So I'm not opposed to losing a couple more parking spaces to get that to work.
Okay. I mean, and just so we are aware, the lot is already non-conforming up here for a setback. So we're making it slightly worse, but again, I didn't think that was a major ask. So if we were to do that, we would then trigger more loss in parking and then request the parking variance is what you would suggest.
Yep.
Yeah.
You ultimately really only lose one row of parking, right? You got to move everything 10 feet.
You'd lose one row of parking overall. So I mean, yeah, you'd lose like 6 or 7, about 12 spots.
Is that something we can take a look at?
Well, the other thing too is the location of this driveway is driven by PennDOT. So that would also be another issue. So if we were to shift that driveway, we would become closer to the existing driveway, and PennDOT wants that separation, as I'm sure your township engineer, for separation between driveways. So we were trying to hold that maximum distance between driveway access points.
Also, I guess, since we're looking at this layout here, why do we have to have all these aisles dumping into the Wawa? Why can't there be a grass strip that separates the Wawa from the parking lot, with the exception of maybe one in the rear of the building that goes through the in and out exit over there on Orleans Avenue? I don't like the fact that all these cars are just going to be able to cut through here from the side and from the rear where it says proposed lot B, that it's unrestricted access and there's going to be cars just zipping through the parking lot. I think that's very unsafe.
And I think that's a really helpful comment, and Justin can chime in if he wants to, but absolutely, and it's something we would definitely look forward. Again, just so we're clear, this is just right now a sketch because we don't have it fully engineered because we're not to that point yet. So comments like that, for example, are extremely helpful, and we can include that moving forward in our design.
Correct.
So here's a question for you. I mean, obviously you guys have something scaled up here and everything like that. That's great. I'm not opposed to the Wawa. I actually kind of I like the idea of having it there. So it's not an anti-Wawa issue, but I agree with, if you're going to need variances and everything of that sort, let's try to get this parcel as close as we can. If you're looking at where that entrance is and you have the trees there, and I understand that that's an entranceway there, but if you would move that lot over, we're saying one, but even if you had to eat up 2 lots, 2 parking spaces, and then you had parking spots going in there, you're now going to increase parking at the Wawa site where those shrubs are. You move those shrubs over, you can have parking spots there. So it wouldn't be messing up the entrance. You would have just parking spots to the right of the entrance. There, right in there. If you move that hand all the way up, like right in there, you would have parking spots. That would go in perpendicular to the spots now.
Agreed.
The only, you know what I mean?
The only issue is that we would have to, in order to make the concern is the setback. So what we would need to do is shift the building over 10 feet. So if you shift that building over 10 feet, you're shifting the drive aisle 10 feet. And then that's getting closer to this drive aisle. So I do agree with you. If we could just move this lot line 10 feet, I agree with you. We could keep that parking and just get a double row. I do agree with that. But shifting the building is where the snowball effect comes, because that's where you have to move the internal drive aisle over as well.
Does the building need to shift? Can it change, orientation? Does it have? Can it just, hold that same line on the, we'll call it west side, the east side of the plan? The building moves west and then it grows to the north and south.
No, that's a prototypical Wawa building. So, I mean, that is their standard. So we can't really make modifications to the building itself.
Understood.
Justin, you mentioned that that PennDOT is adamant about the location and the separation. Is that a conversation that you can have with them to circle back and see if 10 feet is going to make or break the deal and maybe include the township in those conversations?
Absolutely. No, that's definitely. We already had some preliminary scoping meetings with them. They did set the location, but it's a concern of the Planning Commission, so we can, of course, bring it up.
Can the building be rotated 90 degrees?
Yeah,
it cannot.
The doors are different.
Yeah.
It's for safety reasons. They have to have a view of the pumps for emergency shut-off.
Sure.
No, but that, as Julie indicated, this is a sketch at this point. I mean, it's a requirement of the ordinance that when we're coming in for a subdivision to show at least conceptually what the final build out is going to be. It's going to be, essentially as very close to this, but we do have some flexibility when it comes to design, layout, and that's why we're just showing it with the anticipated variances, and we will fine tune them. Once we get past the subdivision and zoning change, we'll have the ability then to fine tune exactly what we're looking for and come back in front of the zoning hearing board with the bare minimum required for the proposed development.
Yeah, we'll pare it down as much as we possibly can.
But my issue comes back to, you're asking us to recommend approval of a subdivision that we know violates our zoning ordinance, and that to me is poor planning. Again, I understand the parking setback issues, they exist. I have no problem with that. We can make them better with a little bit of grass, but they think the building setback issue, I don't understand why, if we know this is where the building has to be, why we can't make it be there.
Again, it was mostly driven by, of course, the parking requirement and by the drive aisle. We couldn't put that drive aisle any closer to this internal drive aisle. And they, of course, wanted as far away from the intersection as possible. So this is where we thought would be the best location for it and the minimum required amount of relief. We did look at the existing building, and that existing building is approximately like 95. So we're only exacerbating the side yard setback by approximately 5 to 7 feet. I'm not exactly sure the number.
But you're not, because that building is a separate lot. It no longer matters what that building is because you're creating a new lot. So you're violating it by the distance that you are, 10 feet.
Okay. It's fair. Understood. No, I mean, we can certainly look at seeing if PennDOT will allow us to shift that driveway over and see if we can conform with your side yard setback. Front yard setback from Arlene's, actually.
So is that entrance really needed? You're not going to get many people. It's going to be one way in, one way out. You're going to go on that side of the highway. What more would just to have them come around, make the right Arlene's and come into the building? Is that driveway truly needed?
It is truly needed. And for the amount of volume that Wawa sees, you want to take access off of the main road as much as possible so that you're not coming off of the side road. So PennDOT, we did do the traffic count. We did show PennDOT what we were requiring. Just for pure traffic circulation and volume, that right in, right out off of Lincoln is desirable from not only from Wawa, PennDOT, and the applicant, but just from a site safety circulation as well too. It's a lot of movements in a Wawa, so you want to make sure it's as intuitive and as ease of access as possible.
Understood.
I think, do you want to go back? We're still in subdivision.
Yeah, I did neglect to mention that we had requested 4 waivers from the subdivision land development ordinance, but they're basically deferrals. They're not even waivers. We know that we need to provide this information. I don't know if you have Justin's March 27th letter that outlines the 4 subdivision land development ordinance provisions that we are requesting waivers from. But again, we are going to provide this information, just we're going to provide it at a later time.
I don't see that letter. So if you could just briefly touch on them.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's, as Julie indicated, there's 4 waivers that we're requesting. The first one requires that the location of all existing and proposed fire hydrants and utilities be shown on the minor subdivision plan. This is just a deferral. We're asking for a waiver to show the utilities on the land development plan because it doesn't really pertain to the subdivision. Following in line there requires certification of water and sewer facilities from a supplier and PennDOT sewer facility planning. Again, just asking for a deferral to the land development stages, and we're requesting the waiver.
But public water and sewer is available.
Public water and sewer is available, and we'll request and obtain all the required permitting at the time of land development. Saldo 19179D requires a drainage plan, impervious surface ratio, and adequate stormwater management. As part of land development, we are going to provide full stormwater management and obtain a MPDS permit, which is going to improve the stormwater on site. So again, just asking for the waiver as a deferral. And lastly, it's 19179D10 requires a erosion sediment control plan. And again, we're not doing any improvements right now, so asking for deferral to land development. Those are the 4 waivers in front of you that pertain to the subdivision.
Thank you.
And if you didn't have any further questions with regard to this subdivision, we can switch over now to the rezoning petition, if that's okay.
Any of the board members have any additional questions?
Yeah, so also what I'm hearing here at this point is that the only reason why we can't move this whole building is because we do not know if we can move this driveway over. So the whole concern of us doing a subdivision that's not going to be compliant with our own zoning is because we don't have that answer, correct?
Correct. Oh, well, I mean, we do have an answer. We did meet with PennDOT, and the location of this driveway
Yeah.
is where PennDOT asked us to put the driveway.
I understand that's
what's
where they asked, but would they deny if we're sitting there saying that by that driveway being there, it's making our zoning non-compliant? Would they be willing to move that over 10 feet?
That's a question we're going to have to ask. And
Yeah, I
off the
think
top
that's
of
a
my
question we need.
and they may deny it because they do not want. They were already unhappy with the separation between the driveways. They understand the need of this driveway given the use and given the proximity to the intersection. They may push back if we ask them to go 10 feet closer, and because they essentially want it further away, but they also don't want it closer to their intersection. So we sort of found a sweet spot in the middle and placed the driveway with the minimum impact on what we're calling a minimum impact on the front yard. I understand it's still an impact and it's still, at your liberty here, but that's where we feel the driveway is going to be required from PennDOT based on initial scoping readings.
It's something you can still
We're going to,
explore.
absolutely. We're going to explore it. I mean, I'm not saying no. I'm based on experience. I have a feeling PennDOT's going to say they want the driveway separation more than they want us to comply with their front yard. So try to work it out with the township. So,
I have a suggestion, if I may, and just a suggestion, but if the path forward, if there was a positive vote for the recommendation, there would be a procedure where they'd have to get zoning relief. And so the zoning hearing board would weigh in on that setback along with you. And at that point, maybe there would be an answer from PennDOT. And so if the board was inclined, it may be to push the decision with your recommendation that if it's possible, have the building moved and the driveway realigned, and at least the zoning hearing board would be armed with the fact that that suggestion was made, and they kind of have a full gamut of your comments. And from what I've heard from our attorneys is that, all of the recommendations and board motions are all going to be contingent upon the zoning being granted. So if the zoning hearing board was not inclined and agreed, that the Wawa should adhere to the front yard setback on Orleans, then at that point they would have the ability to deny the zoning. I don't know, Julie, does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that's what I had indicated, that if the planning commission was to look favorably and recommend approval of these applications, that they would be conditioned on obtaining the zoning relief. So, and I guess I phrased it, satisfying the comments in your letter, Joe, and part of your comments include the zoning relief that will be required. So yes. So if we get to the zoning hearing board and they deny this application, then the subdivision fails. It becomes null and void.
And by
So
then,
that's why I'm
Justin,
saying there's so many different steps.
by then, would the zoning hearing board have a response from PennDOT in writing with maybe the township weighing in and being at that meeting?
absolutely.
That's just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, if that's something that you'd consider.
So I just have a quick question. Mr. Jones, this may be directed at you, but if the driveway were to stay where it was, and as you go past the pumps, everything shifts over 10 feet so the building can be, where it needs to be and the road kind of jogs around a little bit, would there be an issue with that? Or does it have to be a straight shot after the pumps all the way through?
I want to, Joe, I don't know if you don't want to take it, I will, because ideally when you're coming in off of a boulevard type entrance, you want to keep it as straight as possible. If you do jog it, it just causes, everyone's been to a Wawa. They know the traffic that circulates the Wawa. And to create any sort of obstacle or something that defies driver expectations just causes issues. So, ideally you want to keep that as straight as possible for as long as possible. But if that's something that we're going to have to consider to get this approved, we can certainly look at that as well. And I can work with Mr. Jones on that as well.
Okay.
Let's see what PennDOT.
I'm not a Wawa expert, but I've seen Wawas that weren't completely surrounded, and maybe they're the old model. But what if you were to put the building more closer to the driveway? Maybe there's some minor adjustment to that driveway, as Mr. Hughes said, along with part of that concrete island that appears to be there, and just have that like an unloaded side of the building. And again, I don't I'm not trying to tell your business, just the thought, looking at the plan.
No, and that's understood. We are showing loading. That is their prototypical spot for loading based on their doors. So, I mean, we would essentially that whole concrete footprint around the building would have to shift over 10.3 feet to comply. And we're going to have the conversation with PennDOT. Let's see where it goes with PennDOT. And if they come back with a negative, we'll explore other options. But I will certainly keep Mr. Jones and the rest of the township in the loop, and we'll come up with something, and we'll one way or another, we'll try to see what works here.
Yeah, I mean,
we understand your concerns.
You could also potentially just make that section to the plan east side, one way right next to the Wawa, to the right side of the page. Sorry.
Over here.
On the on the right side of the page as you come in off of
The right.
your other right.
Yeah. Okay. So no, I thought you were saying something else.
As you come in off of Lincoln Highway, if that were to turn to one way and you just shut off the other way of the other directional flow of traffic. So once you pass the Wawa, that could be a potential solution.
Okay. No, that's an option too. Look, I do understand your concern. I was looking at both sides, what maybe we can do on both sides to make this work, but let me see what I can do. Let me have the conversation with PennDOT. And again, I think that we're going to need to go to the zoning hearing board. So there's another level of checks and balances that you guys could weigh in on. But I do understand your concern, and we'll try to make it so we can have a compliant front yard along our lanes.
Any other questions for the subdivision from the board? If not, you can proceed to talk about the zoning change.
Back for you.
Wonderful, thank you. If you could put up the zoning classification map, I think that's the best way to review this request. So again, the entire property is zoned SC shopping center, and the intent is to rezone the 2-acre parcel to HC. And the zoning classification map is very helpful because you can see along the Lincoln Highway corridor, there are many properties that are zoned HC, and there are a number of different sizes. So this clearly is not spot zoning. It's certainly not out of character of the neighborhood. The corridor is a retail, commercial, business establishments all along the corridor. And so I think it fits in perfectly with all the other uses. The second point to make with regard to the rezoning would be that the uses in the HC, the permitted uses in the HC and the SC are similar. They're all commercial in nature. So I think those 2 points highlight how this rezoning would fit in with the character of the neighborhood and would work for this site. And I have to also mention Joe's letter because he does make these 2 points as well, which is very helpful in moving this matter forward and supporting this petition for rezoning. And so that's basically it in a nutshell. If there's any questions with regard to the rezoning, I'm happy to answer them.
I personally don't have a problem with the parcel being rezoned HC because there are mostly HC parcels along Route 1 on that particular side of the road anyway. My biggest concern is approving a lot that may or may not get variances.
And I agree with you, and that's why I said from the beginning that this is procedurally difficult to navigate because there are a number of approvals and a number of steps that we need to get through in order to get this project approved in the end. And trying to figure out the correct order in proceeding is also difficult, but we need to create the parcel first. And that's why, again, we would say that any recommendation be conditioned upon us satisfying the comments in Joe's letter, which include obtaining the zoning relief that would be required, so that if we don't obtain that zoning relief from the zoning hearing board, the subdivision then becomes null and void.
And I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's backwards. Because
I understand that, And, there's case law about it, and the case law says that unless your ordinances say that you have to do one step before the other, that there's no set procedure in obtaining your approvals. So you could actually even obtain land development before you get zoning, but it doesn't make sense. You're right, because land development requires a lot of costs in engineering. I was trying to put this nicely.
Fair enough.
But the engineering these plans, for land development is much more extensive than a zoning plan. A zoning plan's one sheet, you get that first. I agree with you. That's the way it makes sense to proceed, especially financially for developers. But the developers are very committed to this project. So they're willing to take the chance moving forward. So with that, that's our presentation this evening. Really, again, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate this opportunity to present virtually, and we very much hope that you will recommend positive support of this project and the applications that are before you.
Thank you. Any board members have any comments?
Quick question. If we approve this for, 2 acres, and let's say that you do want to move it in a little, or you want to change things around, is this only for that particular plan, that plot of land per se, where if you wanted to expand a little bit in one direction or another, is that going to be an issue?
Well, it could be, but we could also amend our plan at that point. We could come in with an amended plan. And if it's just a small amendment, sometimes it can even be done administratively. It would really be up to the township how they would want to proceed in that regard, but we could amend it. If we
wanted
wanted
to make it difficult for
than
us either, if we approve this and then you say, oh, well, we can't do what you want because now this has been approved. That's all.
Well,
No, I absolutely understand your concern.
my whole concern is this. It seems like you're looking to get the minimal amount of acreage that you can squeeze everything in. Okay. And I just feel that with this, if your concern is, we can even go even a little bit further. If your concern is coming off of the highway, you need a longer straight line. Well, then guess what? Then maybe instead of just going out 10 feet to the right, you go back 10 feet, 20 feet back also. And then now we don't have that concern with them coming off of the highway, going right into the building, so I just feel that with everything going on right here, it just feels your window's so small that you're 10 feet out. That's how I look at it. I feel that there's a lot that needs to be checked, whether it's just, like you said, move it a one-way road going to one way, like they do over on Worcester Road, or, however we got to do it. But I just feel that the way this is set up right now, it's set up to fail, because God forbid, like, Brian was saying, if Wawa does pull out, what are we stuck with? We're stuck with a building that's got to be that exact size in that same exact spot, or it's not going to fit.
Would you?
Again, I understand your concerns, absolutely. I can tell you that I've worked on many, many Wawa projects, and I know for a fact that Wawa's sweet spot in terms of the acreage that they need is 1.5 acres. So this exceeds the amount. So they're not trying to squeeze it on a small lot. They really aren't. They felt that this was a good design, that it made planning sense. It's meeting the minimum acreage requirement for the HC district. And this is a typical size. It's not a little bit larger than a typical size. But we do understand your concerns. Again, this is just the first part of the project, and any approval, again, is contingent upon getting the next approvals. So if we don't get the next approvals, you haven't approved a lot.
So
it's going to become null and void.
You had mentioned the other Wawas. I actually pulled up 3 of the Wawas that are around here. I looked at the one on Green Lane. I looked at the one on New Rogers Road. Both of them were about 5 acres. I looked at the one that's down, splitting with the Rite Aid. That was a recent one in Falls Township with the Rite Aid, and that's 15 acres, which is also sharing, kind of gets similar to this. And they do have their setbacks in place. So you could do that with the setbacks of it. Like I said, it's just a matter of, taking on more acreage. And I think that there should be no problem with that because, like I said, I just randomly pulled up 3 of the Wawas around here in public records. And they're the ones that
Wawa doesn't typically own their parcels, they lease their parcels. So I'm not sure, that might be part of the larger plot where there's other commercial uses on it. Unfortunately, Mike Riddell was supposed to join us this evening from Wawa. I don't think he's on the call, but he would be able to confirm that Wawa's sweet spot is about 1.5 acres. I just had a Wawa approved in Lower Southampton Township that's on 1.1 acres. So
we set, just so for everyone's record, we're providing 82 parking spaces on the Wawa. That's probably 30 more than Wawa typically requires for their minimum allowable. We set the property line at the 2-acre minimum, which is the HC district minimum lot size. We tried to make it as conforming as possible given the constraints. Right. I think that, just to reiterate, I think what Julie's saying is, we can say it the other way. Even if you guys were to approve this subdivision tonight or recommend approval of this subdivision, we still have the chance of going before the zoning hearing board and them having an issue and not granting a variance. So it works both ways. I understand your concern, but an approval tonight or a recommendation of approval tonight does not guarantee that we are going to get these variances. We still know we have a couple steps ahead of us. We have to build an argument and explain why we think this is the minimum necessary setback and relief required. But I just want to make sure that we're perfectly clear on that your recommendation is not an approval tonight. We still have other steps to go. And
yes,
if any one of those parties say no, we're right back in front of you with a revised plan.
Those other properties are owned by Wawa, by the way.
So,
okay.
all right. So I guess would you be willing to go and explore this moving of this lot line and then come back? I mean, I know you want to move the project forward, excuse me. But I'm thinking that we would feel much better making the decision if we knew that there was no other alternative.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is if, do you mind if we just have a discussion privately real quick?
Go ahead, have yourself.
I hope that's what they do. I'd like to not vote on it and have them come back for a vote another time with the answers.
Brian, this is David with the Falls, and we have no one in the queue for public comment.
All right, thank you.
Can you guys hear us again?
Yes.
Mr. Jones, I was just looking at the layout, and I was thinking of your one-way comment of circulation. We would just have to double check with Wawa for their deliveries to make sure that works. But I'm trying to look through the notes to see if there's a minimum drive aisle requirement, because we're showing a 30-foot drive aisle along that one side of the building for two-way. And if we can go down to maybe a 25-foot drive aisle, and if I can shave a little bit off of the loading zone, we could probably shift the building over enough. That would be.
You won't have an ordinance issue with that.
If that's the case, I mean, obviously 30 is preferred, 25 will still work. Maybe we go down those smaller islands and we can make the loading area work as well. So, I mean, I do feel confident that I can make the front yard setback on Arlene's work given the existing layout. If, you know, the township engineer, if we don't have an issue from the ordinance, we're showing 30 foot, I can easily go to 24, 25 and try to make everything work. And I think we have the ability to do that not on both sides, but we have the ability to do that at least on the right side as indicated. And then ultimately we have the ability to go down a one way, which will definitely work.
Correct.
So I know the concerns of the chairman and the rest of the commission. So I'm saying with relative confidence right now that we can make the layout to a 100-foot front yard setback on Arlene's, given holding the existing proposed subdivision line in front of you tonight. If that helps.
That helps. So I heard what the board said. So whoever wants to make a motion, I would just recommend that in the motion that we express our opinion that we do not support the variance for the front yard setback, and the applicant will try and fix that setback issue. So if there's no other questions or comments, if someone would like to make a motion.
Excuse me, Brian, before you do that, can they stop the sharing of the screen for us so we can see the board? Thank you.
There you go. Good.
I don't know if that's any better, but
Yeah. Oh.
I get to see your face.
I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision application and the zoning change application for KA at Fairless Hills LP, 500 Lincoln Highway, TMP number 13017-109, zoned SC, Jones Engineering Associates Project LD 20-04, with the provision that we adhere to the front yard setback off of Arlene's Avenue. And there were some waivers in there.
So I was looking for.
Read them back to him.
Would you like Justin to read them?
I can read them. You want to read the numbers for you?
Yeah, please.
All right. Waiver number 1 is Saldo, section 191-79D7. Number 2 is 191-79D8. 191-79D9. And lastly, 191-79D10.
Thank you.
is there a second?
Second.
I think John got in there first. John, you want to pull the board, please?
Edward Crow,
Yes.
Mary Leschuk,
Yes.
John Haney, yes. Thomas Hughes,
Yes.
Brian Binney.
Yes. And that motion was for both the approval of the subdivision and the approval of the change of zoning.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, guys.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Good night.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is Pennsbury School District, 134 Yardley Avenue, Falsington, PA, tax parcel 13-32-045. Waiver of land development to construct a 765 square foot building addition and additional parking spaces. Hello.
Hi there, thank you. My name is Leanna Clubrio. I'm with Remington and Vernick Engineers. Also here is Pete Medica with the architect, and Tim Holman from the Pennsbury School District. So tonight we're here for the building addition for the new lobby for the Pennsbury School District at the administration building. Let me share my screen here. Here we have a basic site plan that shows the new addition on the south side of the administration building. This is roughly 765 square feet of new addition. This is going at the existing parking lot. Here is a view of the existing entrance to the administration building. Here is a rendering of the addition that just shows the new lobby, and then, you know, in the existing parking lot area. So we have another view here and another view of the addition. So basically tonight we are here for a waiver of land development, including, you know, this building addition. There's some revisions to the parking, basically adding a few ADA parking spaces. And really the whole idea of this addition is just to make an ADA accessible entrance to the school district. We received a review letter from Jones Engineering, and we are able to, we're still working on the revisions, but we're able to comply with all of the comments there. We also received a letter from the fire marshal as well as the Shade Tree Commission, and they had no comments on the plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to the plan.
You had indicated that you can comply with all the Jones Engineering comments, but you're asking for a couple waivers.
Marshall's right.
Correct. Yep.
So if you could just touch on those, that would be great.
So yeah, the requesting a waiver from requiring street trees along the frontage. Basically, this is just sort of, we're working within the existing property. It's a small addition. We're just requesting a waiver for that.
Which section is that? Could you?
I'm sorry, 191-48. The second waiver is a partial waiver from 191-61-A, requiring sidewalks to be constructed along the frontage of all land development. Basically, we have a concrete walk that, you know, sort of goes up to the school. So again, we're just requesting a waiver from that. The final waiver is from section 191-78C2, and that's from requiring the existing features to be shown within 200 feet. This is sort of a small project, so we're hoping that we didn't have to show all the additional information beyond the property.
We'll typically grant that waiver with the understanding that you'll provide any information that the township engineer deems is necessary for the review.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board?
No.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion to recommend the waiver for land development application for Pennsbury School District.
Hold on one second, Ed. There you go. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ed. Sorry about that.
I make a recommendation for the waiver of land development application for Pennsbury School District, 134 Yardley Avenue, TMP number 13-032-451, zoned institutional, Township of Falls Township, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, JAE project number LD 20-11. Dated the plan was July 15th, 2020. With the waiver of 91-48, 91-61A, and 191-78C2.
Those are partial waivers, Ed.
Well, it says partial here, but she's asking for the actual waiver, correct? I mean, I know it says partial in here, but she's asking for a waiver.
Well, the application is for a waiver of land development, and inside of that, there's additional waivers. So waiver of land development doesn't eliminate you from the requirements, only from the process. So I think it's appropriate to mention that they're partial waivers for
partial. Okay, so I correct that. It is a partial waiver for 191-48, partial waiver for 191-61A, and partial waiver for 191-78C2.
There's a second.
I second it.
Second by Mr. Haney. Poll the board, please.
Everett Crow,
Yes.
Mary Leschuk,
Yes.
John Haney, yes. Thomas Hughes,
Yes.
Brian Binney.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Night.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Have a good night.
Have a great night.
All right, the next item on our agenda is Alro Steel, 17 Progress Drive, Marsville, PA, tax parcel 13-047-166, zoned HI, preliminary land development for proposed construction of a steel distribution facility and associated improvements.
Good evening. Mike McGinnis from Begley Carlin here on behalf of the applicant. To provide a little bit of background about this project, our client owns 2 parcels at the northwest corner of Steel and Progress Drive, tax parcels 1347-166-1 and 1347-166-2. The property is presently vacant, located in the HI district. And part of the project is to consolidate these 2 parcels into one larger tract comprising approximately 14.63 acres. We did appear in front of the zoning hearing board in December and were granted 2 variances, specifically one pertaining to impervious surface and one pertaining to the site access points. This is a 3-phase project, with the final product being the construction of an approximately 254,699 square foot building for warehouse distribution. And then within that building, there's approximately a 10,744 square foot office space. Certainly, we can break down the phases as we go through the presentation if you'd like. They are illustrated in the land development set submitted by Kristen Holmes, who is with us tonight. And I would note that even though this is phased, the stormwater is all installed in phase 1 and calculated for the full build. To provide a brief bit of background about Alro, they've been in business for over 70 years. Alro processes and distributes metals, plastics, and industrial supplies with next day delivery to over 25,000 customers in North America. I would note that the only real processing anticipated at this site is bulk cutting to clients' requests prior to shipping. And I believe it's accurate to state that Alro has over 70 sites in 12 states. The goal here would be to eventually, at the end of the process, hopefully employ approximately 80 to 90 individuals at the site. And we do have 5 waiver requests for the project. So everything other than the waiver requests identified in Mr. Jones' review letter will complies. And I don't know if we want to throw up, Kristen, on your end, a screen share of the site plan and or the rendering to provide a bit more context for this before we jump into any of the waiver requests, or if it's the Planning Commission's pleasure, we can scroll through the phases so you can see what we're talking about and how this would proceed moving forward.
Before we do that, Mr. McGinnis, Joe, are you there? Mr. Jones?
Yes, just unmuting.
So what are we approving all 3 phases in their totality? Are we approving phase 1? What are we
The
approving?
applicant, I believe, is seeking preliminary and final on all phases of construction, with the understanding that they're going to build them over time, but they're going to escrow and seek approval for all 5 phases. Mr. McGinnis can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that is accurate, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
So
5 phases or 3 phases?
It's 3 phases.
My apologies.
Thank you.
So, Mr. McGinnis, if there's somebody from Alro would just want to tell us briefly what's going to happen here. I mean, you mentioned that they're going to be cutting things. Are they bringing in bulk materials and cutting it, or are they? What? I mean, can you maybe just give us a brief overview of what's going to happen here?
Yeah, it's John Rumler. I'm a VP of Administration for Alro, and we do have about 70 locations. Primarily, we'll distribute and do some first stage processing, as Mike mentioned earlier, some cutting. And what we do is we buy from steel mills, we inventory material, we'll do some first stage processing, and we'll ship it next day, typically to our customers. We're typically within about a 50-mile radius of our customer base. So, you know, this facility is going to replace the facility we have right now in Huntington Valley. And, you know, so we have, you know, some route trucks that'll go out like spokes on a wheel in different directions and deliver material every day, you know, on a next day basis. So I don't know if that answers all your questions or if you have any other ones or.
No, thank you. That's sufficient for now. If we have any more, we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. McGinnis, you proceed, please.
Thank you. Kristen, can you put up, perhaps I think it would be beneficial, based on the Planning Commission's questions about the phasing, if we could put up the land development set has, I think, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 split out. And then if you wouldn't mind just providing a quick summary of the changes as is intended as we move forward here, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. So if everyone can see my screen, I've put up, first I put up a color rendering that we've done of the overall site. And this illustrates the full build of the third phase of the site. So just to give some background, I think everyone's probably familiar with the location, but Steel Road South is to the east of the property. Progress Drive is to the south. As Mike had mentioned, there are 2 driveways proposed off of Progress Drive for the internal circulation of the development. In addition to the drives, there is actually an internal loop for the property itself. So you have the full circulation of the drive around the building to the rear, back around, as well as a driveway along the frontage near the office, which is located along the Progress Drive side. Additionally, there is parking proposed along that frontage of the office location, and I will flip through the different phases in a minute to show how it changes between each of the 3 phases. This slide makes it a little clearer too as to the stormwater management that is proposed. We do have 2 infiltration basins, one shown along the frontage of Progress Drive, another larger basin along the corner of Steel Road and Progress Drive, which is the lower section of the property. And then there are 2 infiltration trenches which run along the edge of pavement along the western and northern boundary of those pavement areas. So I'll flip to the land development plans now, and we can start with phase 1, which is reflected on the plan before you. This plan shows a building of approximately 157,928 square feet. There are the 2 driveways along Progress Drive, but you will note as we go to the next phasing, the western driveway will be relocated when we get to the phase 3 development of this. And this essentially, as you see, the building shown before you, part of the circulation within the building itself and the operation of that building, there are on either end, on the sides, the eastern and the western sides of the building, there is an interior drive which the trucks will circulate through the building. So it's important to note that the circulation around the buildings and out to Progress Drive are creating a straight path through the building and then to be able to circulate around and back out. So the driveways along Progress are aligned with those drive-through portion areas of the building. This phase 1 accounts for the number of parking that would be required for the employees that are intended to be within that first phase of development. So it does have the parking along the frontage of the office as well as a secondary area to the west of the driveway.
I think that's 82 spaces for phase 1, I believe.
Yes, I believe that is correct. And then, as I mentioned before, the stormwater management that was shown on the previous rendering, they are all part of this first phase of development. So the infiltration basin along Progress Drive, as well as along Steel Road South, and then the 2 infiltration trenches that run along the perimeter of the north and the western boundary of the property.
Well, Kristen, when on the grading plan for phase 1, it kind of indicates there's some kind of basin or something to the left, to the west side of the phase 1 building. And then on phase 3, it shows a building on top of it. So what happens to that?
Yeah, so in phase 1, so because the stormwater facilities are designed for the full build of the third phase, the trench, you'll notice in phase 1, sits further away from the driveway because once phase 3 comes into play, it will be abutting the driveway of that third phase. So in order to accommodate necessary grading and drainage in these initial phases, we have, and I can flip to the grading plan. Let me see if we can do that. There's a lot of lines in here, but in this, we are showing some sump areas within the lawn of the western portion to the west of the driveway, I'm sorry, to the west of the building. to allow for minimum grades and drainage within that grass area during that first and second phase of development. So it's not a true basin. It's really just a sump area with storm inlets and piping that will bring that water into the trenches to the west. And then as we move on to the next phases, that piping will be removed as the building goes into place in phase 3. So as we move on to the phase 2 layout, this is showing all of the existing improvements in a grade color, and then all of the new work to be done in a darker hatch. So all of the work in phase 2 is to be done to the rear of the building. It is an additional bay being added on to the rear. And then any work that would need to be done in regards to the driveways, circulation, and pavement in that rear would all be occurring just in that area. The driveways, the parking, all of the stormwater would all remain intact from phase 1. And then moving on to phase 3, this building addition will occur on the western side of the building. So this is where the driveway that previously existed on that western side of Progress Drive will be removed, and a new driveway will be installed further west to align with the new drive-through lanes of that western portion of the building. So new driveways, new curb cut, and the building addition running along this side. And as you'll...
I'm sorry, we'd be adding approximately 16 additional spaces to compensate for the anticipated addition of employees during this phase.
Yes, so this grade area on the western side of the parking would be new parking spaces being added to accommodate the additional employees for that full build out scenario. And you'll note here, I think as I previously mentioned, the infiltration trench that was already in place is now abutting the driveway of this third phase.
When the third phase is in, what is the flow of the trucks going through the building? Because I think on the first phase, you kind of circled around the building as if they came in one side, spun around and came out the other. But just looking at the drawings, everything looks like it comes from the north side and then comes south.
It does. It goes through the building from the rear to the front of the building in circulation pattern.
Okay, and it's that doesn't change then, no matter throughout the phases. It's from the north to the south.
Correct. Okay. The internal circulation through the buildings would remain as their general operations. It would just be the expansion of the bays and the facilities within the building.
Just how do the trucks, I guess, make the turns? What are we talking about coming through here?
Kristen, can I answer that?
Sure.
This is Greg with Echelon, the general contractor. The trucks actually come in both entrances at the curb cuts, and the traffic cross each other in the rear. So you may come into the right curb cut and come up the side of the building, go along the back, and then you'll circle back into the building. And the opposite applies of trucks coming in the other curb cut. They'll come up, they'll cross in the back and go in that way. All of that's happening after hours. And the whole point of it is that all traffic stays within Alro's property. And that's, they circulate their trucks that way for staging for second and third shift primarily.
Okay, is it a different use on either side, or it doesn't, they're all kind of just doing the same thing?
No, one side is receiving, the other side is shipping. So the material comes in primarily from the right side. The receiving is the right side, and then the product does move across the floor to the, or it comes in the left side, I'm sorry, and moves across the floor to the right side. That's where it's shipped out of.
So I have a question for you. So if you have a truck coming in that's dropping something off, and then you have a truck that's coming in that's going to be receiving something, and they're both in that lane inside the building, Is that other truck that's just empty able to
No,
leave,
no, no,
or is
no.
that other truck in the way?
You don't have, all truck traffic is going in the same direction. And if a
Oh,
truck
I
is,
thought you said you were going in. I thought that originally, but then I thought you said one could come in from the left and one could come in from the right. Okay.
Yeah, they come in and loop around to the other side.
right,
I got you.
they-
I understand. That's what I thought you said originally, but then you confused me when you said
Oh,
one could
I'm
come in
sorry.
from the left, one could come in from the right. That's why I was like, whoa, okay.
No, they pass each other in the rear of the building up there. Yes. If you do have two trucks coming across, they do pass each other up there.
Okay.
That way it helps with the turning radiuses, and you've got more of a straight shot in. Nobody's coming in and doing a jackknife back inside the building.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay. Understood. That was my,
I'm sorry about that.
thank you.
I will flip back to the rendering, but I will also show you, we do have a rendering of the proposed building with a colored elevation of what the building will look like from each of the 4 elevations.
With the caveat being that in terms of the specific color there, we've talked about it with Alro's team, and try as hard as we might, we can't accurately depict what the color will look like. So I don't think you're going to see quite the pinkish hue that you're looking at, but that's as reasonable a proximity as we could come up with. Hence the warning label.
Just so you know, for what it's worth, the upper color, which is a metal panel, that is going to be what they call a soft white, and then the bottom part, which is precast, that's more of like a taupe color. So, and then the glass, they do. There is what I'll call almost like a cobalt blue band going around the building, which is Alro's colors, which you can see in their logo below, that blue. And then the glass of the punched windows at the top, the high bay, and at the office has also got a blue tint to it.
And the only other thing to supplement that comment that I didn't point out at the beginning is obviously the township has had many applications in the past where people are leasing property or have an agreement with USX. Alro purchased the property. They're committed. They've been committed, and they're looking forward to, as you can see by throwing the name on the side, to being a partner in the community for the long haul. So this is not some equitable agreement. They purchased the property and they're committed to be here, and I would be remiss if I didn't share that. Are there other operational questions before we move into a couple of the waiver requests?
Any other
Really
questions?
quickly. Oh, go for it. So really quickly, you made a comment about expanding, adding in parking spaces. Was that only for the construction, or are you going to be having more employees working with the larger facility?
There will be more employees as each phase comes into play. So I'm going to zoom in, if my computer lets me, into our parking calculation table here. And it does provide a breakdown for the number of employees in each phase, the number of managers, the vehicle count, and the requirement. So in phases 1 and 2, we are maintaining the same number of spaces that are shown at 82, but we are providing that, anticipating the phase 2 build out of that scenario. And then in phase 3, we are adding parking to provide a total of 98 in order to accommodate the requirement for the additional employees that would be going in. And it should be noted, and it might be clear from this table, that the bulk of the employees would be provided in that first phase. And in the second and third phase, as we add an additional bay into the building, it's a minor increase in that total count, but there is still an increase that we are accounting for.
Okay.
I do note that there aren't any spaces for parking large trucks. Are all the trucks parked inside the building all the time?
And as part of that being a 3-shift operation for this. I'm sorry, was someone else?
No, go ahead, Kristen.
As part of being a 3-shift operation, I don't believe there is intention of the trucks being parked outside. It is a continual operation that is run throughout the day and night.
So someone from, to supplement that, someone from Melro can correct me if my understanding is incorrect, but since this is in essence a 24/7 operation, we don't really have overnight stored vehicles. The trucks are dynamic, meaning that most, if not all, the trucks are out during the first shift, and then they're lined up along the rear drive during the second shift, and then they're pulled into the building during the third shift to be loaded. That's my understanding of the operations.
So,
Yeah,
so when a truck comes into the facility, I assume they have to contact somebody in the office to find out where they're supposed to go. Are we going to have trucks staged out on Progress Drive?
No. That's the whole point of the internal circulation is the trucks are primarily staged inside in the drive lane bays along the rear, and there could be some along the side of the building within the Elro property, but no, that's the whole point of internal circulation, so nobody is out on the public street.
How many trucks do you typically have, circulating through there at any time inside of the building?
They're inside the building. It could handle up to 6, probably 12. There could be, I would think, 8 to 12. 600. Yeah, you could probably have 3 trucks, 2 rows of 3 trucks toe to heel on each side. So they could have 12 trucks, and then each one of those bays, there's an overhead crane coming over loading those trucks up. So you could a bay could handle 2 trucks on each end, so 4 trucks.
Thank you. Is there any other board questions? Mr. McGinnis, would you just like to touch on the waivers that you're requesting, and I assume everything else will be will comply?
That's correct. We have, as I stated at the outset, we have 5 waiver requests. I think Mr. Jones grouped 191.37G and G4 into one. So depending upon how you read that, there would be 4 or 5. But for the purposes of our specific presentation, we've split them out. We have a waiver request from 191.37G to not provide raised planting beds for parking areas exceeding 20 spaces in a row. The thought behind that, and Kristen can expand, is providing curbed islands at intervals along the truck drive could present a hazard as well as a constraint for snow plows. And I would also note that I think for phase 3, Remington and Vernick made a note that we should include the verbiage that it's a waiver, even though it's in that same section, for no one row of parking spaces shall exceed 20 spaces. That would be added on to that. It's all in the same section, but that would be the waiver request for 191.37G.
Now, for B, 191.37B, as in boy.
Go ahead.
Does that what you were talking about? I thought you said G.
It is G, I believe.
Okay, B says.
Oh, and B, right. So we have G and B. Yes, we have a waiver request from G and from B. So that would be B. And then G, we have a partial waiver from plantings around off-street parking and loading areas. So we do have G and we have B. You're correct. Thank you.
And you are providing curbing along the front of the building where the visitors parking is?
Correct.
Yes.
There was also a partial waiver request for 191.36D.
That's correct.
As well as 191.78C2.
Right. And then the last one would be 191.45C, which was not identified in our letter, but it is correctly, it is identified in Mr. Jones' letter, and that would be the final waiver request.
I'm kind of confused. So can you just go through the numbers one more time?
Sure, I'm
I feel like
sorry.
you jumped around a second.
Well, I'll go in order, I think, as they are addressed in Joe's review letter. So the first one in Joe's letter is 19136D, a partial waiver from the section of the ordinance to require curbing along all driveways. So that is a waiver request or a partial waiver request. We have a waiver request from 19137B. We've managed to group D, B, and G for linguistically challenged individuals together, so I'll try to pronunciate. And that is, the applicant is requesting a partial waiver from the section of the ordinance requiring curbing along all parking facilities. Then Mr. Jones noted, at a minimum, concrete bumper blocks must be installed along all parking spaces to prevent overhang onto the proposed sidewalk. We do have guardrails, and again, Kristen can expand upon that. We have 19137G, which is a waiver from the section of the ordinance that requires curbed raised planting beds and plantings at intervals not exceeding 20 spaces for the off-street parking facility. I think technically that would require 17 trees for 98 spaces, and I believe, show as many trees as is feasible for the location. We have 19145C, which states in Mr. Jones' letter that the applicant is requesting a waiver from this section of the ordinance to allow multiple stormwater structures within the existing drainage easement. And again, my understanding is we're discharging each within the existing drainage easement, which is a swale which handles flow from the property. But again, Kristen can expand upon that. And then the last waiver request would be 19178C2, and that is an existing features waiver. So a partial waiver from the section of the ordinance that requires existing features to be shown within 200 feet of the land to be developed. And we've provided survey information within the existing boundaries. So those are the waiver requests.
If I can, Ms. Holmes, that trees, were we able to comply with the total amount of trees, maybe not in the same right locations that were required, or are we short?
We are requesting a partial waiver for the trees in regards to the parking area trees. 17 are required, and we are providing 13. I just pulled the site rendering back up on my screen if you can see that. So it does reflect the proposed landscaping. We do have shade trees proposed along the frontage where it is possible to provide those between the building and the sidewalk and that front parking facility. In between those other areas, we do have conflicts with utilities, transformers, and different features that exist along that frontage. In addition to the trees that are proposed there, the area in front of the office does have additional foundation planting, shrubs, and some other highlighted landscaping in addition to separate from this, I know, shade tree requirement. And then we are providing some along the southern side of the parking lot as well. In addition, there's a zoning requirement for plantings along the parking facility. So this southern portion of the parking area has shrub and ground cover required based on that zoning, in addition to the shade tree requirements from this partial waiver request.
Thank you. And Mr. McGinnis, I guess the Remington Vernick engineers review letter will comply, or is there anything there that you are requesting waivers from?
I could probably answer that quickly. This letter is from June, so we have actually already responded to the comments in here. We did provide a traffic study to them for review. So yes, everything was a will comply and has already been addressed on the plans that were submitted.
Great. Is there any questions from the board?
When was the date of that Remington Vernick's letter? Because I don't have it.
June 16th. So there's no other questions or comments from the board. Mr. McGinnis, if you have nothing else,
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Mary, it seems like you want to make a motion.
There's no public comment.
I can, now that I have the date. I'll make a motion to recommend approval for the preliminary and final land development application, Arlo Steel, Progress Drive and Steel Road South, PMP number 13-047-166-001 and PMP number 13-047-166-002, zoned heavy industrial, with the will comply for the with the Remington Vernix letter June 15th, 2020, the Fire Marshal letter August 10th, 2020, and the Jones Engineering Associates letter August 18th, 2020, with partial waiver 191-36D, 191-37B, waiver for 191-37G 1 through 4, waiver for 191-45C, partial waiver for 191-78C2.
I second.
Ed, you second?
Yep.
Hold the board, please.
Edward Crowe,
Yes.
Mary Leschuk,
Yes.
John Haney, yes. Thomas Hughes,
Yes.
Brian Binney.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
you very much.
We appreciate it.
All right, the next item on our agenda is 261 Lower Marsville Road, Arlington, PA, tax parcel 13-028-019, a preliminary land development for proposed building addition over existing impervious surface with associated improvements.
Thank you. You're all stuck with Kristen and I again for this, so my apologies in advance for that. Again, it's Mike McGinnis from Begley Carlin here on behalf of Bob Marquis. The property address is 261 Lower Morrisville Road. It's zoned LI and it's on a 1.45 acre tract. Property is currently improved by a 2,843 square foot contractor's office. There's also a 1,774 square foot accessory building. I think that I would imagine most members of the Planning Commission are somewhat familiar with Mr. Marquis. This is his property, and I would just note that this is what he owns, and I believe he'll take special care to make sure that everything is done properly. Hopefully, if we are lucky enough to move forward. The majority of the site presently is covered with gravel to store equipment in the exterior. The proposal is to construct an approximately 14,165 square foot addition, which would be used primarily for the maintenance and storage of that equipment in the interior. There's full connectivity, and we believe that that is going to be a substantial improvement from the way that the equipment material is currently stored. There is no change to the operation. There is no functional impact. There are no additional employees, no change to the roadway. Literally, the only thing that is occurring here is an addition of space so that we can take the equipment which is being stored on the exterior and bring it inside to the addition. So, Kristen, if you want to put up the site plan, we're happy to go over any questions you have about the operations or any questions from a technical standpoint, or Bob, who I believe is with us. We have 7 waivers, and I'll just mention that I think 6 of the 7 waivers pertain to existing conditions that are already there that we're just proposing no alteration to.
And I can go through the plan quickly in regard to the layout. If you'd like, the existing building along Lower Morrisville Road is shown in the lighter gray hatch. The proposed addition is to the rear of that. As Mike had mentioned, this is all within existing impervious areas. It's an existing gravel yard in the rear of the property. And this project is actually proposing a pretty significant reduction in impervious with this improvement. So even though we have a new building addition, we are removing impervious along the western boundary of the property between the building addition and the property line. So it is a reduction.
Are there any operational questions before we get into the requested waivers?
I have a question. I have a concern, actually.
Okay.
My concern is the infiltration trench is very close to the property line, and they're going to put a 4-foot deep infiltration trench about 2 feet off of the neighbor's parking lot. And I have concerns about whether that might undermine their parking lot.
Sure, and the trench that Mr. Binney's referring to is along the northwestern portion of the property line here. There is, as part of the existing conditions of the property, there is an existing storm system that runs along this western boundary with a storm inlet in the northwest corner, piping that runs towards the south and discharges into an existing riprap swale along the property. As part of this project, and in order to comply with the volume calculations for stormwater management, even though we are reducing impervious, we are still showing the calculations that are required. We are proposing to excavate around that existing pipe and install a stone trench surrounding that. So understanding certainly the concerns in regards to the proximity to that property line, I think a couple things to note. One, in regards to the property itself and encroachment, the applicant, Mr. Marquis, has coordinated with that adjacent property owner and has received a letter acknowledging the project in support of it. So he has reviewed and seen these plans to acknowledge the improvements that are being proposed along the property.
And there's sorry, just to interject very briefly with that, Kristen, there is an acknowledgement as well that certainly we will need to be securing a temporary construction easement, which that property owner is willing to grant. So, sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
Nope, and just another factor with this being Bob's property himself and his own development, there will certainly be special care taken along this encroachment area and along these shared property lines to ensure that there is no undermining throughout the process of this. So Bob is aware of the location of this and the means and methods of what would need to occur in order to install the trench along this boundary.
So the existing storm sewer system that's there, is that a perforated system or is it just a collection system and pipes it directly down to the riprap?
That is just a collection system. That is a solid pipe. So the portion within the trench area, that pipe would be a perforated pipe within the trench area.
Okay, thank you. Is there any are there questions from the board before we get into the waivers?
The only question I have is this: if you're looking at the actually your picture right on the plans that you gave us, it shows where your site is, and it shows that you have numerous trucks and everything on a property that's not part of the site. Will this help that problem and be able to get your trucks back onto the property, or will this hinder that?
Not sure what you're talking about, Ed.
If you're looking on the front, if you look at the picture right on the front aerial map of it, it shows where the site is, and you see a bunch of the trucks off the site. I went out there today and actually looked at it, and it does go past the fencing.
And I would say, as part of that, the applicant has agreed to remove the encroachments to the rear of the property as part of this project. And I think, yes, to answer your question, the reason for this building and this enclosure is to help enclose and weatherproof all of the items that are currently being stored outside. So getting everything under roof, concealed, is really the intent of this.
Okay, fair enough.
No other questions?
Brian, should we note that if we do decide to move forward with approval under the condition that there is a removal of those encroachments?
If you feel like you like to, yes, but I'm pretty sure that property is owned by the railroad. But yes, if you feel like that would be like that to be a requirement, then by all means.
And I will note, we do have a note on the plan regarding that.
Right. We're complying with that anyway. So if the planning commission is more comfortable making that as a condition, we certainly have no objection.
Okay, if it's on the plan, I don't think it's necessary if it's on the plans.
Is that all, Tom?
That's it.
All right, Ms. McGinnis, if you'd like to touch on the waivers.
Certainly. We have a waiver request from 191-37B from providing 15 foot of open space between the curb line of uncovered parking and the building. This is an existing nonconformity. We have a waiver request from 191-39G pertaining to sidewalks, which we believe would be really an unsafe condition due to vehicular circulation and obviously the lack of sidewalk being appropriate on industrial properties. We have a waiver request from 191-44D from sloping at least 5 feet from the property line. Kristen touched on this already, and I would just reiterate that we've been in communication with the neighbors and will continue to work with that property owner with respect to this condition. We have a waiver request from 191-48 to not require street trees. There are trees in the interior, and this is, again, just requesting that remaining with the existing condition as the property is currently constituted. We have a waiver request from 191-62B with respect to road widening. As I noted before, this is just an addition for storage and will require no additional traffic. We have a waiver request from 191-78C2, and it's the same existing features waiver, and we have provided survey information. And then finally, we have a waiver request from 187-13B to permit 12-inch pipe in diameter rather than the required 15 in order to connect with the existing inlet, which is there. So those are the 7 waiver requests.
What was that last section?
It is 187? I think that's right. 13. I have it 187-13B. Is that correct?
I mean, 191-78D5?
In the letter, yeah. 191-78D5, C5 is the last waiver we have in the letter. I don't have anything from 187.
That may have been picked up from a different review letter, but I would suggest that due to the limitations in the stormwater management system, times past where we found that it was impossible to put a 15-inch pipe, that we would change the material so it's structurally sound and deem it compliant. So, Mr. McGinnis, I don't think you need that one.
Okay, fair enough.
I just have one question for Ms. Holmes. Is why in today's world would we be on an assumed datum?
This is based on the survey we were given. So this was a project that has been in the works for several years now, quite honestly. So we are using a survey that was obtained previously, and it has been updated for this project. The surveyor working through that has been working in an assumed datum.
And another question I have is, you indicate the existing stormwater system along that property line that we discussed earlier discharges onto riprap that appears to be on the neighbor's property. Is there some kind of agreement or easement?
There, to my knowledge, there's no easement in place, but there's an acknowledgement between the property owners for that swale. And actually, over the last few years or so, Mr. Marquis has actually improved that swale. He has provided the riprap in that, and he has improved the condition that is there because it was, in not such a great condition. So he has actually taken on the maintenance of that over the years to ensure that it is a functioning swale.
And then
This is Bob Markey. That existing swale has been in existence since 1952 when Hubbard Supply came down with William Levitt to build Levittown. Mr. Hubbard owned all the property that is the pre-engineered buildings going towards Tyburn Road and sold that off to Mr. Worthington. So that swale has been in existence since 1952 in the piping that feeds that swale.
All right, thank you. And as far as the Remington Vernick letter of August 14th, other than the waivers we've already touched on, is there any additional?
We have no additional waivers for the Remington and Vernick letter.
Any questions from the board?
No.
No public comment.
Thank you. If there's no questions from the board, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve preliminary and final land development application of Marquee Construction at 261 Lower Morrisville Road, TMP number 13-028-019, zoned light industrial. Jones Engineering Associates Project LD 20-09, with the approval of waivers 191-37B, 191-39G, 191-44D, 191-48A, 191-62B, 191-78C5, and a partial waiver of 191-78C2. I think and will comply of the Remington and Vernick engineers letter dated August 14th, 2020.
And fire marshal letter?
Yes. Yes, also will comply for the fire marshal letter dated August 10th, 2020. Yeah, I think that's everything.
I think so. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Haney seconds. Could you poll the board, please?
Everett Crowe,
Yes.
Mary Leschuk,
Yes.
John Haney, yes. Tom Hughes,
Yes.
Brian Binney.
Yes.
Thank you all.
everybody.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, good night.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good night.
All right, the last item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from July 28th. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Mr. Crowe made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hughes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Mr. Haney abstains. A motion to adjourn.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are we adjourning to the usual place?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Overheating on this one.
All right. See everybody in 10 minutes.
See ya.
I'm gonna-